The conference room fell silent as Thomas Reed's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Madeline, I've made a decision about the management position." My heart pounded. This was it. 6 years of early mornings and late nights were about to pay off. "I'm giving it to Derek." The words didn't register at first. Derek, the guy who started 3 months ago. Thomas leaned back in his chair, that smug smile spreading across his face. "You're just not leadership material, Madeline. Some people are built to support, and that's okay." Laughter rippled through the room. Not loud, cruel laughter, but those quiet snickers that somehow cut deeper. My hands trembled under the table. I forced my face into something resembling a smile, but inside something was breaking. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright. The walls are too close. Everyone was staring. Thomas looked almost pleased with himself, like he'd just delivered wisdom instead of humiliation. I nodded slowly, my throat too tight to speak. "Any questions?" he asked, already turning to the next agenda item. I shook my head. Good, I thought, because I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I made it exactly 45 seconds after the meeting ended before my composure shattered. The bathroom door swung shut behind me, and I locked myself in the furthest stall. My breath came in sharp, painful gasps. 6 years. 6 years of covering his mistakes, writing his reports, managing his disasters. And this was my reward? Public humiliation in front of the entire department. I pressed my palms against the cold metal walls, trying to ground myself. The bathroom door opened. Footsteps. Someone was washing their hands. I held my breath until they left. Finally alone, I let myself look at my reflection in the mirror. Red-rimmed eyes stared back at me. Mascara smudged. Hair disheveled from running my fingers through it. I looked like someone who just had their dreams crushed in front of an audience, because I had. "He did this on purpose," I whispered to my reflection. Thomas hadn't just passed me over. He'd orchestrated this moment, chosen the most public venue possible. He wanted everyone to know I wasn't good enough. My reflection's jaw clenched. Fine. If he wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. But first, I needed to understand exactly what kind of game we were playing. My name is Madeline Clark. I'm 32 years old, and 6 months ago, the man who told me I wasn't leadership material had absolutely no idea he was training his own replacement. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. 3 weeks before that humiliating Monday morning meeting, everything seemed normal. Well, normal for my life anyway. I arrived at the office at 6:30 every morning, a full hour before anyone else. Thomas needed his reports ready by 7:15, his coffee exactly how he liked it, and his calendar organized before he walked through the door. I told myself I was being proactive, building trust, showing initiative. The truth, I was being used. Thomas Reed was 45, charming when he needed to be, and absolutely brilliant at taking credit for other people's work, especially mine. He'd been my manager for 3 years, and in that time, I'd watched him climb the corporate ladder on the back of my late nights and weekend work. But I didn't see it then. I thought if I just worked harder, proved myself more, eventually he'd recognize my value. I was so incredibly wrong. My typical day started in darkness and ended the same way. While Thomas rolled in around 9, I'd already sent him 3 client summaries, fixed the presentation he'd butchered the night before, and responded to emails he'd ignored for days. "Morning, Maddie," he'd say, breezing past my desk with barely a glance. Never thank you, never good work, just expectations that I'd continue being his safety net. I ran our most important campaigns from start to finish. When the Riverside account nearly collapsed because Thomas forgot a crucial deadline, I worked 72 hours straight to save it. He presented the recovery plan to the board and got a standing ovation. My name wasn't mentioned once. "You're so good at the details," he told me afterward, like it was a compliment. The office knew, though. I'd hear whispers in the break room. Thomas would be lost without Madeline. She basically runs that department. But whispers don't translate to promotions. Whispers don't get you the recognition you've earned. And whispers definitely don't stop your boss from stabbing you in the back when opportunity knocks. I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. 2 weeks before the meeting, Thomas called me into his office. "Close the door," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. My pulse quickened. This felt important. "I've been thinking about the management position," he began, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. "You know how much I value your work, right?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "You've earned this promotion, Madeline. I really earned it." Hope bloomed in my chest. Finally, he was seeing me. I'm recommending you to the board next week. This is your moment. I actually felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Thomas, I won't let you down. He smiled that warm, fatherly smile he used when he wanted something. I know you won't. You're the backbone of this team. I floated back to my desk, already imagining how I'd celebrate, already planning how I'd prove I deserved this. That weekend, I worked 16-hour days perfecting a proposal Thomas needed for Monday. He'd promised to present it to the board to show them what I was capable of. Monday came. The board meeting happened. And when Thomas emerged 3 hours later, he walked straight past my desk without a word. Tuesday morning, the meeting was called. The one where he announced Derek's promotion. The one where he told everyone I wasn't leadership material. He'd looked me dead in the eye and lied. And somehow, that hurt more than the rejection itself. The days after the meeting blurred together in a haze of self-doubt and silent fury. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Thomas's voice. Not leadership material. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd been delusional thinking I could ever be more than a glorified assistant. My friends tried to help. He's an idiot, they insisted over wine and sympathetic looks. You should quit. Find somewhere that appreciates you. But quitting felt like admitting defeat. Like confirming everything Thomas had said about me, so I showed up. Day after day, I sat at my desk and did my job with mechanical precision. No extra effort, no staying late, just exactly what was required and nothing more. Thomas noticed. Everything okay? He asked one morning, his tone suggesting he didn't actually care. Fine, I replied, not looking up from my screen. You seem off. I finally met his eyes, just focusing on my work like you suggested. Something flickered across his face. Suspicion, maybe, or satisfaction. Either way, he nodded and walked away. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at job postings. My cursor hovered over the apply button again and again. But I couldn't do it. Not yet, because quitting meant he won. And I was starting to realize I didn't want him to win. I wanted something else entirely. The subtle sabotage started the next week. Thomas began excluding me from client meetings. Derek needs the experience, he'd explain, even though these were accounts I'd built from the ground up. Reports I'd written for years suddenly needed Derek's review before being submitted. My access to certain databases mysteriously got restricted. IT error, Thomas claimed. They're working on it. But weeks passed, and my access never returned. To ask for my input on projects, then present my ideas as his own brainstorming. When I tried to speak up in meetings, he'd talk over me or dismiss my suggestions with a patronizing smile. Let's hear from the leadership team on this, he'd say, pointedly looking at Derek. Every slight was calculated, every insult wrapped in corporate speak. We're restructuring for efficiency. Derek's taking point on client-facing initiatives. This aligns better with your skill set. The message was clear. Stay in your lane, know your place, be grateful you still have a job. My coworkers noticed but said nothing. Some looked sympathetic. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Nobody wanted to be associated with the person Thomas Reed had marked as inadequate. I came home exhausted every night, not from work but from the constant emotional warfare. This wasn't about job performance anymore. This was personal, and Thomas was winning. It happened on a Wednesday evening. I'd stayed late to finish a proposal Derek had botched completely. Not because I wanted to help him, but because the client deserved better and I couldn't watch the account fail. When I finally reached my car, the parking garage was empty, dark, silent. I sat behind the wheel, keys in hand, and stared at nothing. My phone buzzed, an email from HR. Subject line, performance review scheduled. My stomach dropped. I opened it with shaking hands. Management has raised concerns about your recent performance and engagement levels. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss these issues and create an improvement plan. The words blurred. Performance concerns. I was the only reason half our projects succeeded. Improvement plan. I've been improving Thomas's disasters for years. Something inside me cracked. Not dramatically. Not with tears or screaming. Just a quiet, definitive break. I tilted my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. And in that moment of complete darkness, something unexpected happened. The fear evaporated. The self-doubt burned away. What replaced it was cold, crystalline clarity. Thomas thought he'd broken me. He thought this final humiliation would make me quit or submit completely. He was wrong. I opened my eyes, I started my car, and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going anywhere. But by the time I was done, Thomas Reed would wish I had. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a new perspective. I didn't need to beat Thomas at his own game. I needed to play a completely different one. While he operated on ego and manipulation, I'd operate on competence and strategy. First step, documentation. I started keeping detailed records of everything. Every project I completed. Every mistake Thomas made that I fixed. Every idea he stole. Every client interaction. Time stamps, email chains, meeting notes. I built a quiet, comprehensive archive of exactly how this department actually functioned. Second step, observation. I began studying Thomas like a case study. When did he make impulsive decisions? When did he panic? What were his patterns, his weaknesses, his shortcuts? He delegated everything he didn't understand, which was most things. He made promises he couldn't keep, then scrambled to deliver. He relied entirely on other people's work to maintain his image. I'd enabled this for years without realizing it. Now I was simply documenting it. "You're quiet lately," my colleague Sarah mentioned one afternoon. "Just focused," I replied with a smile. Focus didn't begin to cover it. I was methodical, strategic, patient. Thomas had spent months tearing me down. I'd spend the next months building something he couldn't see coming. Not revenge exactly, just consequences. The natural results of his own actions, carefully illuminated. I went home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Control, not over Thomas, over myself, over my future, over the narrative that had been written about me, and that was infinitely more powerful. 2 weeks into my new approach, opportunity arrived disguised as disaster. Thomas had promised a comprehensive market analysis to our biggest client, Meridian Industries, by Friday. Friday morning arrived and the report didn't exist. "Where's the Meridian analysis?" our account director demanded in the morning meeting. Thomas's face went pale. "It's in the final review. I need it by 2:00. They're making a decision on contract renewal today." Thomas nodded confidently, but I saw the panic in his eyes. He hadn't started it. He'd completely forgotten. The meeting ended and Thomas practically sprinted to his office. 10 minutes later, he emerged looking for Derek, gone for the day at a conference. He looked at Sarah. "I need you to pull some data for me." "I'm on deadline for the Morrison account," she replied apologetically. Finally, reluctantly, his eyes found me. "Madeline, I need a favor." I looked up calmly. "What kind of favor?" "The Meridian analysis. I need it by 2. That's in 4 hours. I know it's tight, but you're fast with this stuff." I paused, letting him sweat. "I'll see what I can do." I already had 70% of the data. I'd been tracking Meridian's market position for months as part of my regular analysis. By 1:30, I had a comprehensive, polished report ready. By 1:45, it was in his inbox. The client called at 3:30. Glowing feedback. Contract renewed for 3 years instead of 1. And buried in the email thread, visible to anyone who looked, was my name on the report metadata. First crack in Thomas's armor. The Meridian save got noticed, though not publicly. Harold Whitman, our senior vice president, stopped by my desk the following Tuesday. "Nice work on the Meridian analysis," he said quietly. I looked up, genuinely surprised. "You saw that? I see most things that come through our major accounts." He paused. "You've got a strategic mind, Madeline. That kind of comprehensive thinking is rare." "Thank you, Mr. Whitman." "Harold, please." He glanced toward Thomas's office. "How are you finding things in the department lately?" It was a loaded question, carefully worded. I chose my response with equal care. "I'm learning a lot about organizational dynamics." His mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "I'm sure you are." He handed me his business card. "If you ever want to discuss those dynamics or anything else, my door's open." After he left, I studied the card. Harold Whitman wasn't just senior management. He was on the board. He was someone who actually made decisions about leadership positions, and he just told me in corporate code that he was paying attention. I tucked the card into my drawer and returned to work, but something had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was being seen by people who mattered, not by lobbying or politics, but by simply doing excellent work. Thomas built his career on visibility and charm. I was building something different, something that would last. A reputation for competence, for integrity, for actually delivering results instead of just talking about them. The foundation was forming, slowly, carefully, and Thomas had no idea it was happening right under his nose. 3 weeks later, Thomas presented his strategy for the upcoming quarter at the board review meeting. I sat in the back of the room, notebook open, as he outlined a comprehensive digital transformation initiative. Every word, every slide, Every strategic recommendation had come from a proposal I'd written. He'd changed the formatting and added his name. That was it. "This approach shows real innovation," one board member commented. Thomas smiled modestly. "I think it positions us well for the next fiscal year." Another director leaned forward. "The implementation timeline is particularly well thought out, very detailed." "Thank you. I believe thorough planning is essential." I kept my expression neutral, but my pen pressed harder against my notebook. Harold Whitman, seated at the far end of the table, glanced at me briefly. Then he spoke. "Thomas, wasn't this initiative originally proposed by someone on your team?" Thomas hesitated. "Well, it was a collaborative effort. Specifically, wasn't this Madeline Clark's strategic proposal from last month?" The room went quiet. Thomas's smile tightened. "Madeline contributed some preliminary ideas, yes, but I developed them into this comprehensive strategy." Harold nodded slowly. "I see." He didn't press further, but he didn't need to. The question had been asked. The doubt had been planted. After the meeting, Thomas cornered me in the hallway. "That was inappropriate," he hissed. "What was?" "You went a Harold behind my back." I met his eyes steadily. "I didn't say a word to Harold. He asked a question, you answered it. You made me look bad." "No, Thomas, you did that yourself." I walked away, leaving him fuming in the corridor, first blood drawn. The retaliation came swiftly. Thomas called me into his office the next afternoon and closed the door with deliberate force. "We need to discuss your attitude." I sat down calmly. "My attitude? You've been undermining me, creating tension, making me look incompetent in front of the board. I haven't said anything to anyone about you." "Your silence speaks volumes," he snapped. "The way you sit in meetings with that judgmental expression." I almost laughed. "You're upset about my facial expressions." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something cold and venomous. "Let me explain something to you, Madeline. You are support staff. That's all you've ever been, and that's all you'll ever be." "I see. People like you make people like me look good. That's the natural order. You handle the details, I provide the vision and leadership. Accept it." The words were designed to wound, to remind me of my place, to make me feel small. 6 months ago, they would have worked. Now I simply looked at him with new eyes. I saw exactly what he was: insecure, threatened, desperate to maintain control over someone he knew was more capable than him. "We'll see," I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I understand the situation much better now. Thank you for the clarity." I stood and walked to the door. "Madeline." I paused but didn't turn around. "Don't forget who controls your future here." I looked back at him then, and I let him see something in my expression I'd been carefully hiding. Confidence. "Neither of us controls my future, Thomas. I do." I left his office with my head high, even as my hands shook with adrenaline. He'd shown his hand completely. He saw me as a threat, and threats get eliminated unless they eliminate you first. That night, I enrolled in an executive leadership certification program. Online, so Thomas wouldn't know. Nights and weekends, I absorbed everything I could about strategic management, organizational leadership, and corporate governance. I wasn't just working harder anymore. I was working smarter, building skills that were documented, certified, and portable. During lunch breaks, I started having coffee with people in other departments. Not gossip sessions or complaints about Thomas. Just professional conversations about their work, their challenges, their perspectives on the company. I was building a network, understanding the organization from multiple angles. Sarah from accounting, Jennifer from operations, Marcus from IT. Casual, friendly relationships that gave me insight into how the company actually functioned beyond Thomas's small kingdom. I took on a volunteer role with the company's professional development committee. Low profile, but it put me in rooms with senior leadership discussing strategic initiatives. Harold Whitman was on that committee. So was the CFO and 2 other board members. Nobody questioned my presence. I was quiet, prepared, and useful. I improved my public speaking through a local Toastmasters group. I updated my certifications in project management and business analysis. I read everything I could about our industry, our competitors, our market position. Thomas spent his evenings at happy hour with Derek and his golf buddies, maintaining his image. I spent mine becoming the leader he insisted I could never be, not for his approval, not even to prove him wrong, for myself, because I deserved better than what I'd accepted, and I was finally ready to claim it. The opportunity came in mid-March. Thomas had been pushing an aggressive marketing campaign for our spring product launch. He'd overruled everyone's concerns about timeline and budget. "This is going to be huge," he insisted in every meeting. Trust me on this. He didn't review the details, didn't consult with the creative team about feasibility, didn't check whether our promised features were actually ready. He just pushed forward on momentum and bravado. Launch day arrived. The campaign went live across all platforms. Within 2 hours, the calls started coming in. The product features we'd advertised didn't exist yet. Development was 3 weeks behind schedule. Customers who'd pre-ordered based on our promises were furious. Our biggest client, Meridian, threatened to pull their entire contract. False advertising, their legal team stated coldly. Breach of trust. The office descended into chaos. Thomas locked himself in his office, refusing to take calls. Derek looked panicked and lost. The marketing team was fielding hundreds of angry messages with no guidance. At 10:30 in the morning, our CEO sent out an emergency meeting notice. All senior staff immediately. Thomas finally emerged from his office, his face gray. This is a temporary setback, he announced to no one in particular. We'll fix it. But he had no idea how. He'd created this disaster through arrogance and negligence. And now, he was drowning in the consequences. I watched it all from my desk, my expression carefully neutral. Not gloating, not celebrating, just observing, waiting, because I knew exactly what came next, and I was ready. While Thomas hid in the emergency meeting, the phones kept ringing. Angry clients, confused partners, a reporter from an industry publication asking for comment on the deceptive marketing practices. The department was paralyzed. Someone needed to take charge, and Thomas had abdicated. I stood up from my desk and walked to the center of the office. Everyone, stop for a moment. Heads turned. People looked confused. I'd never taken command like this before. Sarah, pull together every client who pre-ordered. I need contact information prioritized by account value. Jennifer, get me the actual development timeline for every feature we advertised. Marcus, draft a technical explanation of what we can deliver immediately versus what's coming. Make it clear and honest. Everyone else, hold all client communication until we have a unified response ready. No contradicting messages go out. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah nodded and opened her spreadsheet. Jennifer grabbed her laptop. Marcus headed to his desk. The paralysis broke. For the next 3 hours, I ran damage control with surgical precision. I personally called our top 10 clients, including Meridian. No excuses, no corporate speak, just honest accountability and concrete solutions. We made a mistake. Here's what actually exists. Here's when the rest will be ready. Here's what we're offering as compensation for our error. Some stayed angry, some appreciated the honesty, but all of them stayed clients. By 2 in the afternoon, the crisis was contained. Not solved, but manageable. The emergency meeting finally ended. Thomas emerged looking shell-shocked. The CEO, Janet Morrison, walked out behind him. Her eyes swept the office and found me. Madeline Clark. Yes, ma'am. Can you come to my office, please? I followed Janet Morrison down the executive corridor, very aware that this moment could go several ways. Her office was minimalist and powerful. Awards lined one wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. She gestured to a chair and sat across from me, not behind her desk. Equal positioning. Interesting. Tell me what happened today, she said, not accusatory, genuinely asking. I laid it out clearly. The rushed campaign. The misalignment between marketing promises and product reality. The lack of review process, the subsequent client crisis. Thomas was leading this initiative, she noted. Yes, but you managed the recovery. Someone needed to. Clients were being damaged by our mistake. That seemed more important than departmental politics. She studied me for a long moment. I've been hearing interesting things about you lately. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face calm. Oh, Harold Whitman speaks highly of your strategic thinking. Several department heads have mentioned your cross-functional collaboration, and today you demonstrated crisis leadership under significant pressure. She pulled up something on her tablet. Yet 6 weeks ago, you were passed over for a management promotion. Thomas Reed indicated you weren't ready for leadership responsibilities. The air felt electric. I'm aware, I said carefully. Do you think that assessment was accurate? It was a dangerous question. The wrong answer could end my career here. But the right answer required honesty. No, ma'am, I don't think it was accurate. I think it was political. She nodded slowly. I'm beginning to think you're right. She stood, indicating our meeting was ending. We'll be conducting a thorough review of today's failures. I'll likely need your input. Please document everything you did to resolve this situation. Of course. As I reached the door, she added, Madeline, thank you for caring more about the company than about covering for bad management. I nodded and left, my heart hammering. Something significant had just happened. I wasn't sure exactly what, but the tectonic plates were shifting. Thomas knew he was in trouble. He could feel the walls closing in, so he did what desperate people do. He tried to create an insurance policy by setting me up to fail. 2 days after the marketing disaster, he called me into his office. I need you to handle the Westfield account transition. I kept my face neutral, but internally, alarms went off. The Westfield transition was notoriously complex. 3 previous managers had failed at it. The client was difficult, the technical requirements constantly changing, and the timeline was impossible. It was career suicide. That's outside my current role, I noted carefully. Consider it a development opportunity, a chance to prove you can handle challenging projects. His smile was poison wrapped in mentorship language. I'll need complete ownership, no interference from Derek or other team members. If I'm going to succeed, I need full authority. He hesitated. He'd wanted me to fail with excuses built in. Now I was removing those excuses. Fine, you have full authority. Report directly to me weekly. I'll need that in writing. Clear scope, clear authority, clear timeline. He sent the email within an hour. Probably thought he was being clever, getting my failure documented. He had no idea he'd just given me exactly what I needed. I spent that evening analyzing the Westfield account from every angle. Previous managers had failed because they'd approached it linearly. But Westfield wasn't a linear problem. It was a relationship problem disguised as a technical one. I had an idea. It was unconventional and risky, but it might actually work. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd made 3 weeks ago at a professional development event. Time to call in some strategic favors. Thomas wanted me to fail. I was going to do something much more interesting. I was going to succeed spectacularly. The Westfield account had a history. 3 managers, 3 failures, and a client who'd become increasingly hostile with each botched attempt. The technical requirements were constantly shifting because nobody had bothered to understand what the client actually needed. They'd been trying to sell solutions instead of solve problems. I took a different approach. First, I scheduled an in-person meeting with Westfield's operations director, Lauren Kemp. Not a sales pitch, a listening session. Tell me what's not working, I said simply. And not just with our product, what's your actual operational challenge? She looked surprised. Then she talked for 90 minutes about workflow bottlenecks, about integration issues with their existing systems, about pressure from her CEO to show results. I took notes and asked questions. When she finished, I said, "Give me 1 week. I'll come back with something that actually addresses what you just described." I brought in Marcus from IT and Jennifer from operations. We designed a hybrid solution that none of us could have created alone. It wasn't what Westfield thought they wanted. It was what they actually needed. 1 week later, I returned with Jennifer and Marcus. We presented not to Lauren, but to her entire operations team, the people who'd actually use our solution. We demonstrated how it would integrate with their current systems, how it would solve their specific bottlenecks, how it would make their daily work easier. Lauren's team asked tough questions. We had answers, real answers, not sales talk. At the end of the presentation, Lauren stood up. "This is the first time anyone's actually listened to what we need instead of trying to sell us what you want to sell." "That's because we're not trying to sell you anything," I replied. "We're trying to solve your problem. If our solution does that, great. If it doesn't, tell us what's missing." 2 days later, the contract came through, not just renewed, expanded, triple the original scope. When the news hit our office, people were stunned. Thomas looked physically ill. Thomas called me into his office within an hour of the Westfield announcement. His face was tight, controlled anger barely hidden beneath corporate professionalism. "You think you're smarter than me?" he demanded, not pretending anymore, not using manipulation or charm, just raw hostility. "No, Thomas, I don't think I'm smarter than you." "Then how do you explain what just happened?" "I did my job. I listened to the client, built a team, and created a solution. That's not about intelligence. It's about priorities." He stood up, moving around his desk. "You've been undermining me for months, making me look incompetent." "I haven't done anything to you, Thomas. I've simply done work. Good work. That's not an attack on you unless you see competence as a threat. Everything you've accomplished, you've done because of the foundation I built, the opportunities I gave you." I actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of genuine disbelief. "You gave me opportunities." Thomas, I've been cleaning up your mistakes and covering for your negligence for 3 years. Every success you've claimed, I built. Every disaster you've avoided, I prevented. The only thing you gave me was a master class in taking credit for other people's work. His jaw clenched. You won't last a month without my protection. Protection? I met his eyes directly. You're not protecting me, Thomas. You're holding me back, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Get out. Gladly. I walked to his door, then paused and looked back. You know what the saddest part is? If you'd actually been a good manager, if you'd supported me instead of sabotaging me, we could have built something incredible together. You chose ego over excellence. That's not my failure, it's yours. I left him standing in his office, his face flushed with impotent rage. And for the first time in months, I felt completely free. Board audit announcement came 2 days later. A routine internal review, the memo claimed. But everyone knew what it really meant. They were investigating the marketing disaster and likely everything that led to it. Thomas was called in for his first interview on a Wednesday morning. He emerged 2 hours later looking shaken. Derek went in next, then Sarah, then me. The review committee consisted of Harold Whitman, the CFO, and an external consultant specializing in organizational assessment. Ms. Clark, thank you for coming, Harold began. We're trying to understand the operational dynamics that led to recent challenges. For 3 hours, they asked detailed questions about project management, decision-making processes, and departmental communication. I answered honestly, not vindictively. I didn't need to embellish or exaggerate. I simply told the truth. Yes, I'd completed the projects attributed to me. Here was my documentation. Yes, I'd raised concerns about the marketing timeline. Here were my emails. Yes, I'd been excluded from key meetings despite managing those accounts. Here was evidence. They asked about the Westfield success. I credited my team. Jennifer Marcus, the operations staff who'd provided insight. The external consultant leaned forward. Ms. Clark, in your assessment, what's the primary challenge in your department? I paused, choosing words carefully. Misalignment between responsibility and authority. The people doing the work don't have the power to make necessary decisions. The people making decisions don't understand the work being done. Harold nodded slowly. And how would you address that? Flatten the hierarchy. Give authority to the people closest to the problems. Focus on results instead of politics. Hire for competence and integrity, not connections. That sounds like a leadership philosophy. It's the only one I know. The interview ended. They thanked me for my time and transparency. I left unsure what it meant, but certain I'd told the truth. Sometimes that's all you can do. Let honesty speak for itself and see what happens. The disciplinary meeting happened on a Friday afternoon. Thomas was called to the executive floor at 2 o'clock. He didn't return. By 4:30, rumors were spreading through the office. By 5, security was escorting him back to collect his personal belongings. I was at my desk when he passed. Our eyes met. He was full of rage and something else. Fear. Maybe the realization that consequences were real. He'd spent so long avoiding accountability that facing it now must have been devastating. The official announcement came Monday morning. Thomas Reed had been suspended pending the conclusion of the board investigation. Preliminary findings had revealed significant irregularities in project reporting, expense claims, and client communication. Derek had been reassigned to a lateral position in a different department. The management role was being reevaluated. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a strange, quiet recognition that systems eventually self-correct when truth is consistently documented. Thomas hadn't been destroyed by me. He'd been destroyed by his own actions, finally catching up with him. That afternoon, Harold Whitman stopped by my desk. Ms. Clark, the board would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock, executive conference room. My breath caught. Can I ask what this is about? He smiled slightly. I think you know. After he left, I sat very still, trying to process what was happening. 6 months ago, I'd been publicly humiliated in a meeting room, told I wasn't leadership material. Tomorrow, I'd be meeting with the board in the same building. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, but I wasn't the same person I'd been 6 months ago. I'd been tested, broken down, and rebuilt stronger. Whatever tomorrow brought, I was ready. I'd earned whatever came next, not through politics or manipulation. Through competence, integrity, and the quiet persistence of doing excellent work even when nobody was watching. That kind of reputation can't be taken away, and it opens doors you didn't even know existed. I arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, wearing my best suit and carrying a portfolio of documentation. The executive conference room was the same one where Thomas had humiliated me. The board sat around the long table, Janet Morrison at the head, Harold Whitman to her right, the CFO, the COO, 2 other board members, all watching as I entered. "Ms. Clark, please sit," Janet said, gesturing to a chair. The same chair I'd sat in during that awful meeting. "Thank you for coming." "Of course." "We've completed our review," Harold began, pulling up a presentation on the large screen. The findings were troubling but not surprising. He walked through the investigation results. Financial irregularities, multiple instances of credit misappropriation, failure to address documented concerns, a pattern of creating hostile work conditions. More significantly, the CFO added, we found a consistent gap between reported departmental performance and actual individual contributions. Harold nodded. When we trace successful projects back to their source, your name appears repeatedly, often without any official recognition. Janet leaned forward. "Madeline, we've made serious mistakes in our leadership assessment. The board takes full responsibility for allowing a toxic management situation to continue unchecked." I nodded but said nothing. Let them finish. "We need a leader who understands integrity," Janet continued. "Someone who prioritizes results over politics. Someone who's already proven they can manage crisis, build teams, and deliver outcomes under difficult circumstances." She paused. "We'd like you to take over as Director of Strategic Operations." The room went silent. Director, not manager, not team lead, director. 2 levels above the position I'd been told I wasn't qualified for. "That's a significant responsibility," I managed. "You've already been handling that responsibility," Harold pointed out. "We're just making it official and compensating you appropriately." The CFO slid a folder across the table. "Salary details, benefits package, and proposed team structure. We want you to build the department you think we need." I opened the folder. The numbers were substantial. More than double my current salary, equity options, full hearing authority. "There's no pressure to decide immediately," Janet said, "though we'd appreciate an answer by end of week." I looked around the table at these powerful people who were offering me everything I'd worked for, everything Thomas said I'd never deserve. My throat felt tight. "I don't need until end of week," I said quietly. "If you're serious about changing the culture, about valuing competence over politics, then yes, I accept." Janet smiled. "We're very serious. When can you start?" "I've been ready for 6 months. I can start Monday." Harold actually laughed. "I believe that." As the meeting concluded with handshakes and welcome aboard comments, I felt something shift inside me. Not victory over Thomas, not revenge, just recognition that persistence and integrity actually mattered. That doing excellent work consistently, even in the dark, eventually got seen. As I left the conference room, I passed Thomas's old office. The nameplate was already gone. By Monday, mine would be there instead. Thomas returned to collect his final belongings on Thursday afternoon. Security escorted him, standard procedure for terminated executives. I was moving into the director's office when he appeared in the doorway. We stared at each other for a long moment. All the history between us compressed into silence. "You won't last a month," he finally said. His voice hollow, defeated, but still trying for one last cut. I set down the box I was carrying and looked at him directly. "That's exactly what you said 6 months ago, right before you told everyone I wasn't leadership material." His jaw tightened. "You got lucky. The board was looking for a scapegoat." I was convenient. "No, Thomas, you got consequences. There's a difference. Everything I said about you was true. You're not a natural leader. You don't have the presence, the charisma." "You're right about one thing," I replied calmly. "I'm not the kind of leader you are. I don't take credit for other people's work. I don't build myself up by tearing others down, and I don't confuse arrogance with competence." He stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "You think you can do this job? You think people will respect you? I don't need to think it, Thomas. I've already been doing it for years while you were taking credit." Security shifted uncomfortably, ready to intervene if needed. But Thomas just deflated. The fight went out of him all at once. "This isn't fair," he whispered. And for just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You're right, it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair when you stole my work, when you humiliated me publicly. When you tried to destroy my career because you felt threatened. None of that was fair." I picked up my box again. "But this is just accountability. Maybe the first time you've ever faced it." He turned and walked away, security following. I watched him go, carrying one small box of personal items. Everything else he'd built here, every achievement, every accolade had been built on other people's foundations. And when those people stopped holding him up, he had nothing left to stand on. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet, settled peace. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the natural consequence of truth catching up with lies. My first day as Director of Strategic Operations was Monday morning. I arrived early, as always, but this time I walked past my old desk and into the corner office that had been Thomas's. My nameplate was already mounted. Madeline Clark, Director. The staff meeting was scheduled for 9. I'd asked everyone to attend. My old colleagues, Derek's reassigned team, even people from adjacent departments. I wanted everyone to hear the same message. They filed in cautiously, uncertain what to expect. Wondering if I'd become another Thomas, I stood at the front of the room and took a breath. Good morning. For those who don't know me well, I'm Maddie Clark. I've worked here for 6 years, mostly keeping my head down and doing my job. That's about to change. Nervous laughter. Here's what you can expect from me as director. First, credit goes where it's earned. If you do good work, your name will be on it. Period. Second, your voice matters. If you see a problem, speak up. If you have an idea, share it. I promise to listen. Third, I will never ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. We're a team, not a hierarchy of importance. I paused, making eye contact around the room. I know the last few months have been difficult. Toxic, honestly. That ends now. We're going to build a department based on competence, collaboration, and integrity. Some of you may not like that approach. That's okay. But that's the culture we're creating. Sarah raised her hand. What if we mess up? Then we fix it. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we respond to them, with honesty and effort to improve. And what about people who can't keep up? Derek asked, challenge in his voice. I met his eyes directly. Everyone in this room was hired because someone believed in your potential. I'm going to give you the tools, support, and opportunities to reach it. What you do with that is up to you. But excellence is the standard, and mediocrity won't be acceptable. After the meeting, people lingered, asking questions, sharing ideas they'd been holding back, feeling safe to contribute. Jennifer approached last. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing us what real leadership looks like. I smiled. I'm just doing what should have been done all along. Leading isn't about control or credit. It's about creating an environment where talented people can do their best work. As everyone filtered out, I stood alone in the conference room. The same room where Thomas had destroyed me. The same space where I'd later been offered his position. 6 months. That's how long it took to go from public humiliation to vindication. Not through revenge, not through politics. Through persistent excellence and refusing to become what tried to break me. My phone buzzed, a text from Harold Whitman. Impressive start. The board made the right choice. I smiled and pocketed my phone. Then I walked back to my office, sat at my new desk, and got to work. Because leadership isn't about the title or the corner office. It's about the character you bring to the work every single day. Thomas never understood that. I did, and that made all the difference. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply becoming the person you were always capable of being, even when someone powerful tried to convince you otherwise, especially then.